At 6 in the morning, 3 men in dark uniforms stormed onto my ranch and shouted that they had a warrant for my arrest. Their badges glinted under the sunrise, too shiny, too perfect, like props pulled from a movie set, but their voices carried the kind of authority that freezes your blood before you can think. And as one of them threatened to seize my property by county order, I found myself staring at a terrifying possibility. What if they weren't lying? And what if they really could take everything from me? My name is Mason Thornfield, and all I ever wanted was peace. That's why I bought this ranch 5 miles outside the nearest HOA community in Quincy Ridge, Arizona, far from the politics, the power trips, and the people who think a title makes them God. Out here it was supposed to be just me, my land, and a quiet life. Yet somehow, the very thing I thought I escaped showed up on my doorstep dressed like law enforcement. The lead officer stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel, uniform crisp but off. Too generic. Patchwork that didn't match county patterns I'd seen in my military days. But I wasn't thinking clearly then. He flashed a badge that looked official enough and barked, "Mr. Thornfield, you're in violation of community standards. Under Regional Compliance Ordinance 147B, you are to stop all unauthorized construction immediately." Community standards. Regional compliance. On my land. I tried to hold my ground. "This property isn't part of any HOA," I said. "You have no jurisdiction here." But he shoved a stack of documents into my hands, pages with sealed signatures, legal jargon, and before I could even process them, the men were photographing my barn, measuring distances, scribbling details like they were planning a military strike. And down the dirt road, a silver sedan sat, still engine off, someone behind the windshield, recording every second. It didn't matter that my gut screamed this was wrong. Their performance was good enough that doubt slid straight into my spine. Maybe the laws really had changed. Maybe HOAs really had gained regional authority. Maybe I'd missed something in the fine print. After all, I had been receiving a few confusing county mailers. When they finally left SUVs kicking dust into the morning air, I stood alone in my driveway, feeling like the ground beneath me had shifted. But as the sun rose higher, I noticed the details. I'd been too rattled to see seals printed in mismatched fonts, county headings that looked slightly stretched, a missing zip code paper that felt like office supply stock instead of government issue. Ordinance 147B didn't exist. None of it did. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Later that morning, the HOA receptionist Helen answered my call with the kind of voice that made you feel like you'd ruined her day by breathing. The moment I said my name, she shifted. "Yes, Mr. Thornfield, you're on our regional compliance watch list." Regional compliance. There it was again. But when I asked for the statute number, she stalled. "I'll need to speak with our legal team." 2 hours later, a violation notice showed up in my mailbox citing unsightly livestock pens. An hour after that, a man claiming to be a county inspector pounded on my door and insisted I'd failed to meet updated construction oversight requirements. Requirements that, just like everything else, didn't actually exist. By noon, I felt like a trapped animal, like no matter what I did, they were 2 steps ahead. I started triple-checking my permits, pacing the kitchen, wondering whether I was losing my mind. I barely slept that night. Every creak outside felt like a threat. Every passing car sent my heart into my throat. And here's the part I hate admitting. I actually wondered if I should just give up. Pay whatever they wanted. Let them monitor my land. Anything to stop feeling hunted. I remember standing at the kitchen sink, staring at my own reflection in the window, thinking, maybe I'm the problem here. Maybe fighting this just isn't worth it. But then something snapped back into place in me, the part that spent years in the military, learning how to read threats, how to recognize manipulation, how to fight back, even when your brain tells you to freeze. I wasn't going to be someone's victory on a spreadsheet. Not on land I worked for, not on my watch. So I dug deeper. First, I looked up the mysterious company HOA Sunset Valley, kept referencing Regional Authority Solutions. The website was bare. No employees, no history, no physical building. Just a single email address and a list of compliance consulting services. When I checked state business records, my jaw almost hit the floor. The company had been formed only a few months earlier by none other than Eleanor Blackwood, president of HOA Sunset Valley. The same Eleanor who'd left 3 voicemails that week reminding me that cooperating would be in everyone's best interest. I needed answers, so I attended the next HOA meeting, pretending to be a curious neighbor. Eleanor stood at the front of the room like a queen addressing her subjects, talking about regional property stability and proactive oversight. People nodded along, clueless. But one board member, a timid older woman named Dorothy, kept glancing around like she was trapped underwater. After the meeting, Dorothy approached me with a tremor in her voice. "Mason, I don't think what Eleanor's doing is legal," she whispered. "She makes decisions on her own. She doesn't let us vote. She hired that enforcement team without board approval, and she mentioned your name specifically." That was the moment I realized this wasn't incompetence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coordinated operation. Just how coordinated I was about to find out. One night I drove by the HOA office and saw Eleanor's car parked inside long after closing. Lights on. Blinds half open. She was working alone. The back door had nothing more than a basic commercial lock, nothing I hadn't bypassed in training. Inside her office computer, I found a treasure trove of horror emails to her enforcement team detailing how to apply psychological pressure on non-compliant targets. A spreadsheet mapping 12 rural properties marked by acquisition priority. My ranch was labeled High Value, Red Zone. A PDF titled Pressure Escalation Protocol listing steps like fake citations, surveillance cycles, document intimidation, forced compliance timeline. Then I found her master map, 12 properties circled with handwritten notes beside each owner's name. Words like isolated, financially vulnerable, weak family ties. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was hunting people. The final thing I found was worse. A plan to convince county officials to grant her HOA expanded regional authority using proof of voluntary compliance gathered through intimidation. She wanted to turn her fake power into real political power, and she was close. I copied everything onto a flash drive and got the hell out. Over the next week, I found 8 other landowners who'd been harassed the same way, papers shoved under their doors. Fake inspectors, fake warnings, even a few break-ins disguised as wellness checks. Some of them were ready to sell. One had already given in. Together we formed a coalition, the Rural Property Defense Alliance. We hired an HOA corruption lawyer. We documented everything. And one brave board accountant, Patricia, agreed to wear a wire in the next board meeting. The recording made my blood boil. Eleanor's voice was cold and confident. "Thornfield is our last obstacle. Use all tactics. Fake citations, surveillance, whatever it takes. Once Commissioner Hayes signs off on regional authority, everything becomes retroactively legal." Retroactively legal. She knew she was committing crimes. She was just betting she'd get enough power to cover her tracks. The commissioner meeting was announced for Tuesday morning. Eleanor arrived dressed like royalty, carrying a binder thick with fabricated charts, colorful graphs, and glowing testimonials from satisfied members. Cameras from local news stations filled the room. County officials sat in the front row. She began her speech with a wide, rehearsed smile. Sunset Valley has pioneered a modern compliance framework that ensures rural and suburban harmony. I stood up. My voice was steady, but inside I was on fire. "Commissioner Hayes, before you consider approving anything, you need to hear this." I pressed play on a portable speaker, the room filled with Eleanor's recorded commands. "Fake citations, surveillance, whatever it takes. Thornfield is the last one." The room went dead silent. Then I placed the forged documents on the table side by side with real county paperwork. Even from a distance, the fakes were obvious. I displayed photos of the officers, the vehicle without unit numbers, the mismatched badges, the sedan that had stalked my ranch. I held up the map she'd drawn of 12 target properties. Eleanor tried to interject. These are taken out of context, but the panic in her voice destroyed any credibility she had left. Commissioner Hayes leaned forward, face pale. "Ms. Blackwood, are you impersonating county officials?" That was it. Her facade cracked. She stammered. She reached for her papers like they could save her. They couldn't. Because right then, 2 sheriff's deputies walked into the room with federal agents behind them. The arrest warrant was long, and the list of charges even longer: fraud, impersonation, extortion, racketeering, falsifying government documents. Her own board members shrank away from her as the deputies cuffed her hands. She started shouting as they walked her out about order and property values and ungrateful communities, but nobody listened anymore. The cameras caught everything. And just like that, the woman who tried to build a private empire on fear finally tasted real authority, the kind she couldn't manipulate. The room slowly emptied after that, but I stayed for a moment staring at the empty podium where she'd stood with such confidence minutes earlier. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from the release of months of pressure that had nearly broken me. My land was safe. The nightmare was over. But the weight of everything she'd done still sat heavy on my shoulders. Walking out of that building into the dry Arizona sun, I realized something simple, something sharp, something true. People like Eleanor don't rise because they're powerful. They rise because everyone else stays quiet. And sometimes, all it takes to bring them down is the first person who refuses to be afraid.